Today I'd like to start diving, kind of related to all of this, to the topic of chastity. Now, when people think of the word chastity, they immediately, in general, if you've heard the word, they think, oh, chastity, no sex. That is not what chastity is. Chastity is not the abstinence of sex. Chastity is a virtue to which every person is called, no matter their state of life. So if you're young, if you're old, if you are married, if you are single, you are meant to grow and have the virtue of chastity. Nobody is exempt from the virtue of chastity. What is this virtue of chastity? Well, chastity is a virtue that helps us to use our sexual desires to love rather than to use. So chastity is a virtue that helps us use our sexual desires to love rather than to use. Now let me backtrack here a little bit and just kind of explore the theme of virtue. What really is a virtue anyway? If chastity is a virtue, so what is a virtue? So a virtue is an inner muscle, and by muscle I don't mean like a physical thing, I mean like kind of like a muscle of the soul, an inner muscle that allows me to do a particular good. Inner muscle that allows me to do a particular good. So let's think of the example of the virtue of honesty. So the virtue of honesty is an inner muscle that allows me to do a particular good. Which good? To tell the truth. Right? It's an inner muscle that allows me to tell the truth. And so if I have this muscle, I'm an honest person, if I have the virtue of honesty, I tell the truth. And there can be a time maybe when maybe I do something I shouldn't or something, and then I'm asked, hey, did you do this, right? And depending on how strong is my inner muscle of honesty, how strong is my virtue of honesty, I'm either going to cave and be like, oh, I'm not strong enough to tell the truth in this particular instance because it's hard, or if I really exercise this muscle and I really have like I really own this virtue of honesty, I'll be able to tell the truth even though it's really hard, even though maybe there'll be consequences for myself and I'll get in trouble, whatever it is, right? Because I have this muscle, right? And because it's a muscle, an inner muscle, is something that can be exercised and is something that can grow, or is something that can, grow weaker. And how does one grow? For example, in this virtue of honesty, how does one grow this muscle? There's multiple ways. One of them is just exercising that particular virtue, telling the truth. Just really trying really hard to tell the truth, and one starts becoming easier over time as one exercises this muscle. And a virtue is an inner muscle that allows us to do a particular good. In the case of honesty, it allows us to tell the truth. Well, in the case of chastity, it's an inner muscle of the heart, that allows us to do a particular good. Which good? To use our sexual desires for the sake of love rather than to use. We can think of different examples. So maybe there's a single woman who is, somewhat young, and she's at work, and she meets this other young man who maybe is also young, but maybe he's been married for a couple years, and she just begins to realize how awesome it is to be in his presence. He's so funny, he really listens to her, and she begins to notice that every time she's in his presence, she just begins to be like, wow, like this guy is really, really cool. And then she also learns that this guy is married. And then there's this decision he has to make because maybe she has this, perhaps thoughts come to her mind of saying, man, like I could do this or that to perhaps spend more time with him, and maybe I could laugh a little bit more here and there, and kind of maybe begin to flirt a little bit to see if somehow he can find me also attractive and enjoy my company. But she learned that this guy is married, right? And so what would be the best thing that she could do to love this man? To try to draw him away from his family, or to say, no, the best thing I can do to love this man is to draw certain boundaries, maybe even internally in my heart, so as to respect that this man is married, and I don't want to draw him away from what he has committed himself to, right? And so here's where the virtue of chastity comes in, right? If this inner muscle has grown, this woman will be able to say no and be able to live that loving thing of putting those boundaries that are necessary so as to not distract this man from his family, right? Or if this virtue is not there, maybe it'll just be really hard not to maybe like kind of flirt or something like that, right? And we could think the same example with a man, right? Just flip it around. Or you can think also of a married man, perhaps or a single man who is drawn to pornography, or a woman as well. There's a desire to maybe receive something through pornography, whether maybe it's to not feel lonely anymore, or to not feel bored, whatever it is that I'm seeking, right? Again, what is the good here? To love, how do I love these persons who have entered the porn industry? Is it to use them for my own sexual gain, even if it's just through a screen, right? That's not a loving thing to do. And so if I have chastity, even though I have a certain sexual desire, it is chastity that allows me to love and say, no, I'm not going to look at this, right? And sometimes, right, if the virtue of chastity, if that muscle is still weak sometimes, then we may end up choosing the non-loving thing to do, and then we have to exercise further this virtue so as to be able to love more and more. I actually think that today's culture, hopefully I'm not going too long here, today's culture, I think, is crying out for the need of chastity. I think of things like the Me Too movement, which I'm not super familiar, so hopefully I'm not ill-speaking, but I think it has to do with like abuse, right? Well, abuse happens because of a lack of chastity. That's the root of it. It's people who have a sexual desire who cannot use their sexual desire to love, and rather they use it to abuse somebody, right? That's a lack of chastity. If you think about how many people, like adultery, how many people are cheated upon in their marriage, this lack of chastity, and children who experience this when their parents are unfaithful to each other, like hurt, and they desire chastity, they desire the faithfulness of their and also the spouses, whoever got cheated on, right? Whether it's the guy or the girl, etc., right? So chastity paves the way to love, and even within marriage, chastity is very important, because not because one is married, it means that one is entering the sexual embrace to love the other. It's very easy to begin to just want to use the other, again, for my own gain, whether it's wanting to feel secure, wanting to feel loved, wanting to feel pleasure, whatever it is. It's possible, even within marriage, to use my sexual desires to take rather than to give. Instead of having intimacy and care for the other, I'm just caring about myself. So chastity paves the way to love regarding our sexual desires. So we all should strive to grow in chastity, and maybe next time we can speak about some ways in which we can grow in chastity.